All right, well, it's good to be back on this lesson again, Firm Foundations, Creation to Christ, with John Thomas Cauthorne. And he's on lesson number 22 tonight. And it's God sent plagues on Egypt, and God passed over Israel. And so we're seeing that God is like a two-sided coin. He judges the sinners, and he saves those who are his. And we're going to see that illustrated tonight. And so, John, come on up here.
Lesson number 22. Today's lesson starts with the Israelites enslaved in Egypt by a powerful Pharaoh. Probably none of us have been enslaved as the Israelites were. But we have been slaves of sin. Let's take a look at how God worked deliverance for the Israelites. Let's read Exodus chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Exodus 5. And afterward Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. Verse 2. And Pharaoh said, Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. God used Moses and Aaron to speak to the king of Egypt, but Pharaoh refused to obey the Lord's command. The word Pharaoh was the title given to all the rulers of Egypt during this period. We are not told in the Bible which Pharaoh was in power when Moses became Israel's leader. Pharaoh did not know the only true and living God, the creator of the whole earth. The Egyptians did not worship God. They worshipped the things that God had made. They worshipped the Nile, the largest river in their country. They also worshipped the sun, moon, and many different kinds of animals. They had many gods. In addition, the Egyptians worshipped Pharaoh, their king, as a god. Most of the people of the world had deliberately turned away from the true knowledge of God. They had become foolish in their understanding about him. Because they did not want to know God, he allowed them to worship false gods. Because the majority of the people of the world had turned to worship idols and had lost the true understanding of God, God called Abraham and made him the father of the nation of Israel. God did this so that, through Israel, he could preserve the true knowledge of God. Through them, God planned to make known the truth about himself to all other people in the world. The truth about God is in this book, the Bible, which God gave through the Israelites. God would have taught the king of Egypt that idols are false gods, and that the God of Abraham and Israel is the only true and living God. But Pharaoh did not want to listen. The generation of Israelites living in Egypt when Moses returned there had not seen any evidence of the Lord's greatness and power. They had only heard about the Lord and what he had done for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now the Lord was going to use this evil Pharaoh and his rebellion to display God's power and wisdom to this generation of Israelites, so that they would know that he was still the Almighty and caring God of Israel. Let's return to Exodus 6. We're going to read 1 through 8. Exodus 6, 1 through 8. Then the Lord said unto Moses, Now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. And God spake unto Moses, and said unto him, I am the Lord, and I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob, by the name of God Almighty, but by my name Jehovah was I not known to them. And I have also established my covenant with them, to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their pilgrimage, wherein they were strangers. And I have also heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant. Wherefore, say unto the children of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with a stretched out arm, and with great judgments, and I will take you to me for a people, and I will be to you a God, and ye shall know that I am the Lord your God, which bringeth you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. And I will bring you in unto the land, concerning the which I did swear to give it to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, and I will give it you for an heritage. I am the Lord. God also planned to show the Egyptians that he alone is the true and living God with power over the whole earth. The gods whom they trusted and worshipped were unable to protect them from the true God of Israel. Among the Egyptians were intelligent, highly skilled people, capable writers, mathematicians, chemists, military and civilian leaders, architects, artists, craftsmen. But spiritually, they were totally blind and foolish. Though they held Israel in slavery, the Egyptians themselves were the ones hopelessly enslaved and held captive by Satan. Soon they would know that the God of Israel was alive, powerful, and able to set his people free. It may be easy for us to see the folly in Egypt's worship, but remember, Satan had deceived them in a way that they would accept in their own day and culture. He is still doing the same thing to people today. Because Pharaoh was determined to fight against God, God planned to use this wicked king to display his mighty power and terrible judgment on all those who rebelled against him. Let's turn to Exodus chapter 7, 4 and 5. Exodus 7, 4 and 5. It says, But Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that I may lay my hand upon Egypt, and bring forth mine armies, and my people, the children of Israel, out of the land of Egypt by great judgments. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I stretched forth mine hand upon Egypt, and bring out the children of Israel from among them. This should be a warning to all of us. We cannot ignore or fight against God and escape his punishment. No one who fights against God can win or escape judgment. Because the king of Egypt refused to release the Israelites, the Lord began to show his great power. Because of time, we will not read all the details about what happened. But if you want to take the time on your own, you will find the story in Exodus 7:14 through 10:29. First, the Lord turned the water in their rivers to blood. Next, he sent plagues of frogs, lice, or gnats, and flies. Then God caused the Egyptians' horses, cattle, sheep, camels, and donkeys to become sick. Next, the Lord caused all the Egyptians to have terrible boils. This was followed by a terribly destructive hailstorm, a plague of locusts, and 3 days of thick darkness in all the places where the Egyptians were living. Pharaoh and the Egyptian people could not save themselves from these terrible plagues sent by God. Neither could their false gods save them. Interestingly, each of the plagues pointed to the falseness of a particular god of the Egyptians. For example, the frog god, their sun god, and their storm god. But for the Lord's mercy and love to the Israelites, they too would have suffered the plagues. The Lord protected the Israelites so that none of these terrible things happened to any of them, even though they were living nearby in the same country. The Lord didn't protect the Israelites because they were without sin or because they deserved his care. He protected them because of his love mercy and grace. Another reason why God protected the Israelites was that God had not forgotten his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God chose Abraham and promised to bless him and to make his descendants into a great nation, and promised that he would be their God. Although hundreds of years had passed and the Israelites were now slaves in Egypt, God still claimed the Israelites as his special people, because they were descendants which God had promised to Abraham. God also protected Israel from the plagues, so that the king of Egypt would realize that the God of Israel was the only true and living God in the whole earth. Because God is supreme and sovereign, he does whatever he chooses to do. With each of the plagues, the pattern of response was the same. Each time the Lord sent a plague on Egypt, Pharaoh called for Moses and asked him to remove the plague. Pharaoh claimed that he would let Israel go. When Pharaoh said that he would allow the Israelites to go free, the Lord removed the plague. But as soon as the Lord removed the plague, Pharaoh hardened his heart and would not let the Israelites out of Egypt. Every time Pharaoh did this, he became more proud-hearted and hard-hearted. Although the Lord had already sent 9 terrible plagues on the rebellious Egyptians, the king of Egypt still refused to obey the Lord and to let the Israelites go free. God knew all along that Pharaoh would be stubborn and would refuse to release the Israelites. Even before he sent Moses back to Egypt, he had told Moses that this would happen. God is never surprised by what people do or by what happens. He always knows everything before it happens, and he always has his plan worked out so that he always wins, no matter what people say or do. This wicked king could not stop God from delivering the descendants of Abraham. The Lord knew that after this final plague, Pharaoh would release the Israelites. Let's read Exodus 11, chapter 11, 1, and then 4 through 7. Chapter 11, verse 1. And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. And verse 4 through 7. And Moses said, Thus saith the Lord, About midnight will I go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the beasts. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there was none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue, against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. God told Moses how the Israelites must prepare for the final, most terrible plague of all. The Israelites were also sinners and deserved to die for their sins. They also would have suffered through this last terrible judgment if it had not been for the Lord's mercy and grace. God remembered his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God had promised to Abraham's descendants God had promised to take Abraham's descendants back to the land which God had given to them. It was now God's chosen time to do this. This is what the Lord told Moses that the Israelites must do in order to save their firstborn children from death. First, they must choose a lamb without blemish. Let's read Exodus 12, 1 through 5. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take up to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. And if the household be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats. The head of each home had to choose a lamb or a goat. The lamb or the goat had to be perfect, without blemish. Do you remember the ram that was to be offered instead of Isaac? It was caught by the horns in a thorny bush. Why was it caught by the horns? Because God is perfect, and everything that he says and does is perfect. He would never accept an offering of an animal that was sick or hurt. Let's read verse 6. It says, And ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. The lamb was to be kept until the day specified by the Lord, which was the 14th day of the month. They were to kill the lamb in the evening of that day. The lamb must die. Its blood, on which its life depended, must be allowed to flow out. This was to remind the Israelites that the punishment for sin is death. Until Adam and Eve sinned, there was no death in the world. But when Adam and Eve were separated from God because of their disobedience, God said that their bodies must also die. All of Adam and Eve's descendants were born sinners, separated from God. That is why all people must also die physically, including you and me. If there were no sin in the world, there would be no physical death. If there were no sin, there would be no separation from God in the everlasting fire prepared for Satan and his followers. When the Israelites killed the lambs and the blood flowed out, the people were reminded that the punishment for sin is death. Just as the ram died instead of Isaac, the perfect lambs which were chosen and killed by the Israelites died instead of their firstborn children. Let's read verse 7. And they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts and the upper door posts of the house, wherein they shall eat it. God told the Israelites to catch the blood in a basin. And then they were to take a small branch of a certain bush and dip it into the blood. With this bush, they were to put the blood on both sides of the door and over the door of the house where they were going to be eating the lamb on that night. It was the blood of the lamb on the doorpost that would save the firstborn from God's judgment. And fourth, they must stay inside the house on which they had placed the blood. They must not go out of the house until the morning. Let's read Exodus 12, verse 22. And ye shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out at the door of his house until the morning. The Israelites were to stay inside their houses on which they had placed the blood. It was just as if they were to hide behind the death blood of the lamb, which God said they must kill in place of their firstborns. And fifth, they must not break any of the lamb's bones. They were not to break the bones of the animal when they killed it or ate it. Let's read Exodus 12:46. It says, In one house shall it be eaten. Thou shalt not carry forth aught of the flesh abroad out of the house. Neither shall ye break a bone thereof. These were God's instructions for Israel. They had to do everything exactly as the Lord told Moses. God has always been the same. He will not let people save themselves in their own way. Do you remember that he refused to accept the clothing that Adam and Eve made for themselves in the Garden of Eden, God also refused the offering that Cain brought because it was not according to his instructions. God told Noah to make the ark exactly as he had instructed him. In the same way, everything had to be done by the Israelites exactly as God had instructed Moses. God is still the same. He has not changed. We cannot come to God according to our own ideas or the ideas of any person. We can only come to God according to his way. If we don't come the way he says, he will never accept us. Let's go back in chapter 12, verse 12 through 14. For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt will I execute judgment, I and the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. And the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you. Then I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for a memorial, and ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. God promised the Israelites, when he saw the blood on their houses, he would not allow the plague to enter and kill their firstborn. How would you feel if this was going to happen here? Can you well imagine the tremendous fear of God that swept through the Israelites? They knew God meant what he said. They believed and obeyed him. Let's read verse 28 of chapter 12. It says, And the children of Israel went away and did as the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. So did they. What do you think would have happened if an Israelite had said, I'm not going to kill one of my good lambs. I have a sick one. That'll do. Do you think God would have accepted the blood of a sick lamb? Or what if another man said, It's a shame to kill a good lamb. I won't kill it. I'll just tie it up at the door. God will see the living lamb, and he will not kill my child by the plague. Do you think God would have passed by the firstborn of that house? No. The lamb had to die. The blood must be shed. They must not forget that the punishment for sin is death. It all had to be done the way God had told Moses. The Israelites were to trust in God, who had told them that when he saw the blood on the doorposts of their houses, their firstborn children and the firstborn of their livestock would not die. Let's read chapter 12 of Exodus 29 and 30. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. Every firstborn Egyptian child and the firstborn of all the Egyptians' livestock died. The punishment for sin is death, but we must remember that the punishment for sin is not only physical death, but also everlasting separation from God in the lake of fire. The Lord passed through Egypt just as he said he would. He always does what he says. He doesn't merely threaten and then not carry out his threats. When God decides to punish sinners, there is no way of escape. Because the Israelites had put the blood on their houses in obedience to the Lord, not one of their firstborn children or livestock died. Because God always does what he says. He said he would destroy the firstborn in the Egyptian homes, and he did. He said he would pass over every house where he saw the blood, and he did. The Lord can be trusted in everything he says or does. Had Pharaoh been warned? Yes, he had. All of the other 9 plagues that the Lord had promised to send had come. Just as announced by Moses. Pharaoh's refusal to yield to God cost him and all Egyptians not only their livestock and crops, but now also their firstborn sons. Because Pharaoh refused to believe God, he and all Egypt paid a horribly tragic price. But even more tragic is the eternal price they would pay for their unbelief, separation from God in the lake of fire. Let's read Exodus 12, 31 through 36. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, that's Pharaoh, and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also. And the Egyptians were urgent upon the people, that they might send them out of the land in haste. For they said, We be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, their netting troughs being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses. And they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as they required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. Pharaoh called Moses that very night and told him to take the Israelites out of Egypt. Pharaoh thought that he could fight against God, and that God could not make him give in. But no one can fight against the Lord and win. We are fortunate to have this story. We do not need to refuse God as Pharaoh did. We can learn from this awful tragedy to believe God and to believe his word. God has not changed. He still requires that we believe him. He still judges sin. And he still keeps his promises. The Lord delivered his people just as he said he promised he would. God will punish those who fight against him, but he will show his mercy and give his peace to those who trust in him.